All right, guys, how you all doing? Welcome to Rukshan on X. As noted by Meconomics, it is an earlier time. So, guys, I've been doing about 9 p.m. starts for this, but I did get a few requests, and I think also from you, Meconomics, if I can do the show a bit earlier. So, I've decided when I'm in Melbourne, I'm going to attempt to do this around 7 p.m. And when I'm, interstate working, it might be a bit later because of the logistics. But I will endeavor to do earlier time like this if that works. I don't know. I don't know if this works for people. Maybe they're having dinner. Maybe they're doing other things, and maybe the later time is a much better time for a chilled out news, live stream where we're discussing the happenings of the days, as well as taking a lot of your comments. As you can see, guys, there's a comment stream for my show that you can see here where everyone can comment, including including my favorite trolls. We've got Swindon here. Breaking news: an Indian reversed into Drew Pavlova's car. I wonder what happened today with Drew's court case. Maybe someone knows. Maybe Drew can tell us in the comments if he's watching. Kane says, "Hey, Rukshan, hope you're having a great week so far, mate. I'm having a good week. It's been quite busy. Yesterday was very eventful. I will talk about the events of last night because there's been a lot of criticism about me as a debate moderator. And look, I think some of it's fair. Some of it's fair. I will answer some of those questions. But yeah, guys, thanks for everyone commenting, and I will try to get to some of your comments throughout the show where I get an opportunity to read them. If you want to support the show, you can also do super chats on YouTube. It's not you're not obligated to do it, but if you want to support my show, you can put super chats on YouTube, and I'll definitely, of course, read them out. But for now, I will pick and choose comments from the normal comment stream as well, just to keep everyone included in this. Yep, David. David says he'll deport you. I'll deport you. Thanks, mate. You'll keep keep at it. Keep working on deporting me. All the best. Now let's go back to last night. So we've got Carl here. He says, thanks for the comment, Carl. I watched the debate yesterday. Happened to realize that Rukshan is actually mummy's boy who's not allowed to voice his own opinion. He's a genocide denier and the servant of the Jewish lobby. That's very loaded, Carl. A lot of things going on there. Obviously, Avi and myself, we do host the opposition podcast, and we had a guest yesterday for a debate between Avi Yemeni and John Ruddick about what's happening in Sydney when it came to the protest. That was, quite controversial in some aspects in terms of the way it was covered and some of the symbolism there. And of course, a successful protest as well, if you look at it in the terms of the number of people that turned up to that protest. So we had I would say, people are saying it's not a debate. People are saying it was an interrogation, it was an interview of John Ruddick. I thought, it would be good to allow these two individuals, Avi and John Ruddick, who are both adults and who can both hold a conversation, to talk amongst themselves and, hash it out. And some of these ideas will come out during that time. Some of these thoughts that they have, because there's been a very public back and forth between them following John Ruddick's tweet about attending that particular protest. So I just let the conversation flow. I let people know early on that this is what's going to happen today. Some people weren't happy about that, and I said I would take these super chats later on, some of the community feedback, and try to have those as questions to put towards to both John Ruddick and Avi Yemeni. But people were not happy about interruptions and things like this. But I thought it was fairly illuminating in terms of their views on particular issues, as well as entertaining as well. Maybe you don't want the debate to be entertaining. I don't know. I thought it was entertaining in some respects, but maybe that's not what these debates are about. But I don't believe that a politician in Australia and Avi Yemeni, who's a political commentator and a journalist here in Australia, can necessarily solve the issues of the Middle East with a debate that will kind of illuminate exactly the solutions to those things. It's kind of a thing that everyone discusses in the comments, and numerous streams we watch with all types of people talking about this issue, and there's not really a solution, is there, that comes from this. So I thought it was important that Avi did try to tease out some of John Ruddick's views as the leader of the Libertarians in New South Wales, a member of the state parliament, and why the sudden backflip. I thought that was important. I thought that's what a lot of the people wanted to know about, because that was what the controversy was as people were discussing this, online. It was really related to John's, flip from being very kind of, pro-Zionist in a way to being more a critic of what's happening. And it's up to people, obviously, how they interpret what they watched. But I understand I understand. These us moderators, we're always going to be caught up in the middle of these things, and there's definitely going to be critiques of me done for my moderation. I mean, I'm critical of the moderators when I watch a Trump and Hillary debate, or a Trump and Biden debate, or Trump and Kamala debate. So I understand. I get it. We got some comments here regarding the debate. So let's have a look. Catherine Cavani, thanks, Catherine, for joining again. No, it showed Ruddick was gullible as the pro-COVID vax mandates. Swindon, I got bored of the debate and just started typing debate Joel Davis, to be honest. I mean, Joel Davis is very eager to debate Avi Yemeni or myself. Let's see what happens in the future. Phoebe says, I was completely appalled Australians were not referenced in Australia on this fed. Maybe give some more information or context around what you're saying, Fee. I'll bring up your comment again. What's the obsession with Freemasons? I think you're asking someone there, Christian. So, and King of Corn says you'll get through it, mate. Difficult topic to navigate. Look, I definitely agree that it is a difficult topic to navigate when you're talking about the conflict in the Middle East. Again, like I said, the politicians here, despite their knowledge of whatever history and all these things, don't necessarily move the needle as far as solutions goes. And Staffy did say, Chris Coveries does indeed have the transcripts. I could not believe that as the debate was finishing up last night, Chris Coveries had already posted some transcripts of the debate, analyzing the tone and who won and all this kind of stuff. And I took that a bit further today. I put the transcript, right? I put the transcripts into Grok, all right, straight from the stream, the complete transcript, without altering anything, as some people have alleged I've altered the transcripts. I'll tell you why later. I didn't do that. I put the transcripts directly from the streaming software that records all the transcripts into Grok and into ChatGPT. So there's two sources of AI. These are large language models. And, it said that Avi Yemeni won the debate. And some people don't agree with that either. Look, I just put it to the AI. Let the robots decide on these issues. Maybe that'll help. Christian says, will you be at CPAC in Brisbane in September? I don't believe so, Christian. I don't think so. It wasn't really a debate, but it was entertaining. Yeah, you can look at it like that. I'm all for the entertainment value. I mean, John Ruddick did say that he loves Piers Morgan, and that he was, people are saying, Avi was interrupting John. But, what does Piers Morgan do when he hosts these guests or debates these guests? But definitely, I take the feedback on board, guys. I do take the feedback on board. I understand maybe next time got to rein these people in a little bit more, maybe rein in Avi a little bit more as well. Yeah, let's see how we go for the next debate. Pasco says he found it somewhat boring, to be honest. Not fair enough. We did get a whole mix of views on how people felt about that particular debate. But I thought it was interesting for John Ruddick to actually put some of his views out there. I thought that was the most important thing, because as a member of Parliament in New South Wales, leader of the Libertarians there, pretty much, for him to have these kind of public views about that, and have a lot of his members and people saying that, they'll never vote Libertarian again, or we're going to resign from the party. I thought it was important that Avi asked some of those questions and try to get out what he meant by all of that. Kane asked, so Avi and Ruddick okay with one another, or the friendship done and dusted? I mean, this is politics. It appears that sometimes people aren't friendly on particular issues, but life goes on. I don't think it's something like that. Avi has to obviously speak for himself, and John Ruddick has to speak for himself. But at the end of the debate last night, it ended with John Ruddick inviting us over for a beer when we're in New South Wales, and we've done that previously. We've caught up with John before while we're in New South Wales, so I don't think those things should change. We should have heated discussions, heated debates, but it shouldn't, change our relationships with people that fundamentally, on most things, we align with. I don't believe in this concept that everyone that even if you're from the same political ideological side, should agree with you 100% on everything. That's what I get a lot of these days. That Rukshan, you've changed a lot. we don't agree with you anymore, and therefore you're a bad person. I don't believe in that kind of things. I listen to a lot of different people that I don't agree with, because sometimes I do agree with them, and sometimes I don't, and sometimes I want to know why they're saying something that I don't agree with. Maybe I'll learn something from that, or maybe it will inform my positions. I think that's important. Ads, right? Avi comes across like he owns your channel. Look, we simulcast, so we have, I think, between us about 11 or 12 different channels, and we send it to all those channels at the same time. So it's a collaborative podcast, and we just send it out everywhere. Avi, compared to me, has a bigger platform. He's got almost 1 million followers on YouTube. I think 600,000 on X. I'm a small time, fry compared to that, with a couple of 100,000 followers all up across my platform. So, Avi does carry a lot of the weight in terms of, our distribution. Because I think last night we had about, when I looked at all the metrics, we had about, I think 35,000 people that had tuned in or watched it at some point during the stream yesterday. So 35,000 people, that's a lot of people, and about, close to 25,000 to 30,000 comments all up. And that's, when I say comments, I mean people obviously write a lot of things as the discussions are going on different platforms, and they're chatting amongst themselves as well. So when you combine all of those together, there was a lot of comments, and I couldn't analyze all the comments. Someone asked me if I could analyze the comments and see what people thought from the analysis of the comments, who won or not. From the super chats, a lot of the super chats that we got on YouTube was clearly favoring towards Avi, but that's not really an indication of whether he was the winner of the debate or not. Um, Oh, mate, here we go. So, alternative media, what you say? So, your platform depends on Avi's approval, and you think that you were the place to be an unbiased moderator. I don't think this is idea that I'm an unbiased moderator. We do the opposition podcast together. Me and Avi are always doing that podcast together. The reason that I stepped back from the conversation that John Ruddick and Avi were having is because of the view that I would not be a unbiased moderator. I would prefer them to just hash it out between themselves on the platform. We didn't have the time or the opportunity to find a third party moderator to come on the show and be able to do that. So it was literally just allowing them to talk. And people are saying, I didn't moderate enough. And now you're saying that I'm a biased moderator. I just let the conversation happen. Yes, sometimes they were yelling over each other or talking over each other. So be it. I think at the end of it, at least as it pertains to John's particular, reasons and, ideas behind him changing his stance and why he marched on the bridge and why he put up that tweet as a leader of the Libertarian Party, I think he answered those questions, and then him and Avi had a back and forth discussion about issues in the Middle East. I'll leave it at that for that, but you guys can definitely. No, Kane. I just saw this, Kane. I seriously thought you were ringing a bell to turn the heat down between the two of you. That was not me ringing the bell. That was just John Ruddick in Parliament. That was a Parliament bell. But yeah. Thanks, Mister. Your shirt nicely matches your mic and background and stream, Rukshan. I am trying to be color coordinated, so there you go. I do like these kind of tones, for sure. Last comment on this one, guys. I'm going to move to the stories now. Avi talked over him constantly. Look, next time, guys, I will shut down Avi. I've listened to your feedback. I will shut him down. I think for his own good. Then you'll say I'm being biased. I'll shut him down so he doesn't talk over people. I can hear the other person speaking. Maybe. All right. We'll do that next time. So thanks everyone for joining in again for another episode of Rukshan on X. This is a very casual, chilled out show where I look at the news stories that are happening. In Victoria, I like to do a lot of Victorian news as possible. Australia, of course, our beautiful country, Australia, and the world, especially the Western world, the Anglosphere. I like to look at stories from that because it somehow relates to and impacts what happens in this country as well, and of course any other important stories from other parts of the world where it might be of interest. But first up, I have this story that's been in the news for a couple of days now. I wanted to bring it up because I just saw Jacinta Allen put up another tweet related to this story. So let's just bring this up. This is about working from home. And I really want to kind of go through this because Herald Sun did a good piece on this and kind of explained what this means. So in Victoria, they're going to legislate, or they plan to legislate, 2 days working from home. So let's see what that means, right? And we had this whole working from home thing obviously during COVID that everyone kind of got used to, work from home. I'm someone that struggles a lot with working from home. I would definitely prefer to be, when I was doing photography, for instance, I'd prefer to go to my studio and edit there, because when I'm at home, I'm just in the home mode. So I know that I would be a very bad worker from home. Even, whatever job I'm doing today, I prefer to go into the office and work in that office space. Or when I go to Canberra, I prefer to work there, because working from home is not something that's really ideal for me as an individual. And I know some people, apparently it works for them really well, but I think it puts up a lot of obstacles or maybe challenges for business owners when they're considering people working from home. Are they going to be doing the work that you expect them to do, right? As a business owner, you're paying people, you're hiring employees. Are they going to give you value for the amount of money that you're paying them as an employer to make it worthwhile? And it becomes different, right, when the government starts being involved in this relationship more and more and more, where they're legislating now, well, planning to 2 days work from home. And a lot of things arise from that. Obviously, there's certain industries where people, can't work from home. A plumber couldn't work from home, for instance. They got to go out on the job. So, how do we deal with those kind of things? So there is lots of, there's lots of ways that this maybe doesn't really pan out the way that the government's planning, and maybe there's a reason why it's only being discussed in Victoria. Some people are saying it's just a bid by Jacinta Allen to trick, the usual hordes of sheep that are in Victoria that seem to vote in the Labor Party. Every time that there's an election, Labor seems to win in Victoria. They've been in government, almost, I think, for 25 or so years, if you look at the last couple of decades. It's intense that people keep voting for Labor, I think, despite the horrendous way that I think this state's being run. And this could be a sweetener come election time that Jacinta Allen's trying to push people towards voting for Labor. So let's have a read of this article, and then I'll get to some of the comments that you guys are saying. And maybe my interpretation is wrong. Let's find out what this is all about. Jacinta Allen says, work from home plan, all your questions answered. What if my boss says no? When will it actually start? Here's everything you need to know about Jacinta Allen's plan to enshrine the right to work from home into law. Premier Jacinta Allen sparked a whole weekend of conversation when she announced plans to enshrine the right to work from home into law. Under the Australian First legislation, Victorian workers who can reasonably do their job from home would have the right to do so at least 2 days a week. However, fuming business figures and puzzled legal experts were quick to point out the plan was not so clean-cut. More than a third of Australian workers, including 60% of professionals, regularly work from home. But will most of us actually be legally protected to work from home 2 days a week, or is it just a political maneuver to win votes? Now, I'm leaning towards it being a political maneuver to win votes, but let's keep reading the details of this. Under the proposal, who would be legally protected to work from home 2 days a week? Workers in both the private and public sector who can reasonably work from home. If you can work from home now, you would likely have the right to work from home 2 days per week. When would this actually come into place? The Premier has pledged to introduce legislation into Parliament next year prior to the November state election. Interesting timing. However, she has not given an exact time frame. This sounds great, but does this actually work? Legally, maybe not. Victoria, like other states, handed its power over private sector workplace regulation to the federal jurisdiction decades ago. Under Section 109 of the Constitution, if a state law is inconsistent with the Commonwealth law prevails and the state law is invalid. The Fair Work Act also overrides state laws that regulate conditions of employment. State laws enshrining work from home to 2 days a week could therefore face a series of legal challenges and even be considered unconstitutional in the event that laws attempt to legislate in territory ruled by the Commonwealth. My EBA doesn't expire for years and doesn't include a clause outlining 2 days a week from home. Will I still be able to work from home 2 days a week? That's actually a good question. General EBAs are under the Fair Work Act, which can override state laws. If your EBA does not specifically outline that you are able to work from home 2 days per week, the right will not be automatically afforded to you. That answers that one. What if my employer refuses? We're going to need to wait more detail to understand what the outcome could be. However, it could depend on a number of circumstances. Private sector businesses are generally covered by Fair Work Act, which override state employment laws. This will need to be tested in the High Court. Jacinta Allen has flagged that the Equal Opportunity Act, which protects workers from discrimination and harassment, could be used to cover some workers. Now, this is the important part. What are the legal experts saying? Legal experts have raised serious questions about whether this will actually pass court challenges. University of Melbourne's Josh Howe, who specializes in labor relations, says there was a potential constitutional hurdle. There'll obviously be an implementation and challenge for companies that are operating across states that have an inconsistent approach. There's a question of what Victoria does to enforce it. What apparatus is Victoria going to use to try to and monitor compliance? There will be people who are opposed to it, employees who are opposed to it, and who will bring challenges. I agree. I think there will be a lot of businesses who are opposed to this idea. I've already heard, just on Talkback Radio over the last couple of days, numerous calls where businesses are saying they don't want the government also then dictating how they, these kind of conditions for their workers when, the taxes that they're paying are through the roof. The government's not paying those taxes. The employees are responsible. The employers are responsible for all of this. And yet the governments are enforcing more conditions on small business owners specifically, I think, which will impact them for this. Now, these larger corporations, what are they doing? They're offshoring a lot of this work, right? We already had Commonwealth Bank, 2 weeks ago, we saw the news stories of them. They have a CBA branch in India, right? They're already getting workers set up overseas in India. So a lot of the big corporations have other ways around this. They might get large AI infrastructure. A lot of these web services like AWS and Microsoft, they're building these cloud-based AI services for these big enterprise style packages for these companies to completely get rid of workers. So they might be able to get rid of a lot of these people in those sectors. But the small business owners, right, which make up the majority of people in a state that have businesses, I think they will find this very difficult in some instances, and you will see, I think, them challenge this. There might be an argument that if you were declining to provide the option to work from home, that you might be discriminating against workers who have legitimate reasons, he said. There certainly might be areas where you could claim not recognizing the right would be discriminatory. And that's the problem, right? We can already see, especially Victoria, like a lot of lazy people in this state, like a lot of people here, I'm not saying in a bad way, but a lot of people in Victoria seem to like this idea of working from home. So maybe it'll be popular. Can you imagine if some workplace, some business, they, are at loggerheads, they're going to, scream discrimination, and, that's going to cause more messes and more legal challenges. And of course, it brings up the other complexities of, around insurance or, work covers type situations where people are working from home, the conditions of that workspace. There are so many things that are added to this, complications, let's say, that it's hard to fathom how this is going to go down. Why has the government announced this? It's popular. Working from home part of the week is a norm post-COVID, and working families, particularly working moms, have structured their lives around the flexibility of 3 days in the office, 2 at home. It also forces the opposition into a corner, support it, where, well, they're giving Labor a tick of approval while turning on their business voter base, oppose it, and they risk losing the demographic they desperately need, women. So I'm not going to keep reading. There's a lot more to that. I just want to play Jacinta Allen. She had a video about this maybe like 20 minutes before I came on this stream. Actually, not 5 minutes before I came on this stream. So let's have a listen to what Jacinta Allen said most recently about this.
From home as a right. Now, last week I shared our plan to enshrine working from home as a right. Now, there's been a huge response, particularly online, so I thought I'd take a moment to respond to a few of your comments. Great news to read when you woke up on a weekend. Hurry up, please. Look, I know that there are many who are keen to see this right as soon as possible, but we do need to take the time to get it right, which is why there'll be consultation with workers and families, with businesses and employers and unions to make sure that we get this right. Once that consultation's done, we'll be bringing legislation to the Parliament next year. Comment here from Kerry. All right for some. What about those who can't work from home? And look, Kerry, this is, again, a comment I've heard a lot about. Met a family recently. They've got 3 young kids. Now, Dad's a truckie, so clearly he can't work from home. But Mum's been able to go back to work when the youngest turned 1 because she had the opportunity to work from home, which meant she could do all the school coordination whilst Dad was doing those really long haul truck shifts. So this is how working from home, it can have a meaningful difference for those families, but also it makes it a fairer society for all of us. So a comment here from Manu, make it 5 days. Look, understand there's a whole range of different views on the number of days, but
Just want to say this Manu, he says, make it 5 days work from home legislated. Bloody lazy, Manu. Just seriously, the type of individuals here comment. I'm guessing these are Labour voters on Jacinta Allen's Facebook page or something, who are asking for a 5-day legislated work from home. It's crazy. It's just the fact that these people aren't thinking how this impacts businesses and business owners. Let's just keep playing this.
it can have a meaningful difference for those families, but also it makes it a fairer society for all of us. So a comment here from Manu, make it 5 days. Look, understand there's a whole range of different views on the number of days, but 2 days a week is really what's reflecting what many employers and what's happening in many workplaces right now. For everyone else, thanks so much for your comments. I know that this is already how thousands of workplaces are working right across the state, and we're not about reinventing the wheel. This is about making it fair, making it law, and protecting and supporting workers here in Victoria.
There you go. That's Jacinta Allen there with some propaganda, because there was a backlash to this, and now she's putting out these fluff pieces about, pretending that she's answering people's questions. But the things that she brought up are quite generic. I think there's more specific questions around the legality of this and the impacts of this on businesses. I don't, specifically oppose businesses if they want to as a choice to allow people to work from home. It's not something that I, as a business owner, would necessarily be comfortable with, making it a permanent type of situation in my business, for instance. I just don't think it works. The type of business that I would want to run when I was in that field. And there'd be a lot of businesses like this where government is, obviously if it's legislated in a way, and depending on your industry, if it becomes the norm for that particular industry, you are almost obligated to do that. And what impacts will that have on your productivity as a business? The impact it will have on your workplace culture. Do you want to have this culture of people who are not at the office, and so on? And I understand, again, we're going to this world where people can work remotely. I do work remotely sometimes, but not mandated for me to do that. But I get that option sometimes, and yes, I understand that there's some benefits to it. But again, I think businesses and business owners need to be the ones in charge and in control of that. And like Manu said, right, why can't we just make it 5 days? Well, a future Labour government trying to get more votes might say, hey, the 2-day work thing is going really great. You know what, you lazy Victorians, we'll give you 3 days working from home come next election. This is the problem when government starts getting involved in this space. And we do not see this happening in other states. That was a great point. I think that was discussed this morning on 3AW with Tom Elliott. That this is not really happening. You got your premiers and Labor premiers in the different states in Western Australia, in New South Wales and so on, and in South Australia. And they're not talking about this idea. They don't want to do this. But Victoria seems to be really, at least for the Labor government side, embracing these type of concepts. So maybe I'm out of touch. Maybe some of you guys in the comments are out of touch, or maybe some people agree with this. McNomics says nobody is forced to work from home by this legislation. Again, like I said, I understand that people aren't forced to work from home, but obviously it means that businesses have to make certain structural differences to the way that they operate, and it does become like a catalyst for that change to be ongoing and more pronounced as the years might go on, where it becomes the norm. And maybe that's just the way the world's going. Yeah, look, I don't want to say, I've worked from home for 15 years, nothing lazy, but I understand. Like I said, I work from home sometimes. It doesn't work for me. I know it works for some other people, but all I'm talking about is the business owners' rights and decisions that they want to make about how their business works. And when this government starts legislating things into law, well, that just means that over time those laws expand. And I think that's what business owners are worried about. Judy B says, I wish Alan would just fix our problems, crime, mass immigration. potholes instead of constantly inventing more ideas that would cause more issues. Look, government doesn't want you focusing on issues right now. They would rather have people like what we're doing right now talking about these type of, up in the air ideas that they plan to do come next election time. But I think it's important. Like, we have to be critical of these ideas because already businesses are struggling in this state. It's very hard to run a business in Victoria. It's very expensive. There's tax upon tax, and there's regulation upon regulation, and on top of that, now we have this type of thing happening as well. So, um, that does definitely have an impact. Let me just go through and read some of your comments on this. I'll just squeeze up a little bit and see what you guys have been saying. Abby says, just another Dan Andrews, but with a set of boobies, both ballless, both brain dead, both delusional. She is Dan Andrews' protege for sure. You can see a lot of Dan in her, but she also has her own traits, I believe. She's not as she's not as calculatedly cunning as Daniel Andrews, I would say. She's a bit more transparent when she's struggling, whereas Dan Andrews is very arrogant, and everything he touches is gold in his mind. I'm saying, and he can do no wrong. Jacinta Allen, there's a few, like, even this video that she's made. I don't know if Dan Andrews would have made this video. All right, I don't know if he would have made this video trying to ease people's worries about work from home. He would have just pushed it through. He's that kind of guy. Economics says, how does someone in another workplace working from home affect anyone else? It doesn't. Complainers just complaining. Well, yeah, maybe I'm just a complainer. Pasco says, the only reason people can work from home is because there's millions of foreigners being bought in to suppress wages of proper jobs. Proper jobs should be paid way more, and work from home jobs should be paid slave wages. I don't know about slave wages, but look, there is this thing happening with mass migration, changing the workforces, and also the fact that certain jobs are being offshored as well. Look, I did read someone say on X, if you have a job where you can work from home, it is most likely a job that can eventually be automated or put to AI or something like this. So if you are working from home, most likely those jobs won't exist in the future. It's possible. I mean, it sounds like a way of looking at this. Skippy the Roo says they just want paid days off. Phoebe says we used to get donut meetings for all workers to communicate with other workers. Yes, I remember. I used to work at Dick Smith, and when the head office manager would come down from the Woolies manager, when Dick Smith was owned by Woolworths, would fly down from Sydney. They'd bring a big box of Krispy Kremes because that wasn't available to us Melburnians. It was already available in Sydney or New South Wales at one point, and that was the thing: donuts and meetings and things like this. And you do lose a bit of that workplace culture. Now, does it really matter if you can turn over profit as a business? Like, some businesses do not really necessarily care about the culture in that way, but it can have impacts for sure. DGNRTV says, this is actually something I agree with Jacinta on. There are thousands of other things I don't. People want flexibility if they can. We don't care what the boss thinks. Well, mate, this is the thing. The boss is, it's hard being a business owner. It's hard being the boss. And I think we do have to also care about business owners and the boss as well as, of course, the flexibility, the lifestyle of the worker, people who are employed. Sure, it's good to have flexibility, especially in this fast-paced world that we live in where, even, I agree, women, it's good to have women at home sometimes to be able to look after the children and be engaged in the family unit as well. Like, there are things that I believe are important, like for the family unit and for the relationship between parents and children, and be more involved in that. So maybe working from home does encourage those things as well, in a way. Catherine says, we would be responsible for privacy. Who would be responsible for privacy breaches if the work from home person, if they're accessing tech from home, it could be costly too. Look, there's lots of sophisticated ways of logging into, work systems, VPNs, and all this kind of stuff that happens. Most of these professional companies would have some degree of security enabled. So, I think, depending on the workspace, yeah, sure, there could be possibilities where there are certain security breaches. Like you might have sensitive documents of a client, and you're having a people over for lunch, and you're working from home, and people are able to see someone else's, let's say you're working in a bank or an account, and they're able to see someone else's loan documents and mortgage whatever. Like, it could be anything. I'm just speculating here, but I get that. I get that for sure, depending on the industry. Who is liable if you trip over a step and injure yourself at home? Should the home be a workplace compliant? First aid kits, fire extinguishers, etc. Yeah, I think there was some discussion around this, and some workplaces actually do go to very serious lengths to ensure that the space that you are working in is somewhat compliant. So I don't know exactly how this works because I've never been in that situation. Someone can maybe fill us in the comments, but I think there is something to this. And of course, the way the world works, if there's money to be made for lawyers, they will find a way, right? They will find a way. You can rest assured that in 10, 15 years, we'll have commercials on TV where they're saying, did you work from home in the last 10 years and now you hurt your back? Well, now there's a class action lawsuit, blah, 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 blah. Right? That's the kind of stuff that we see. We thought would never be possible, but we do see these class action lawsuits in the future. So it's possible. DMAX says these laws just create more work for small businesses and create the environment for corporations to take over. So, guys, I'm going to keep going. Thanks for all your contributions to this particular topic. And I think it's something, obviously, that we'll discuss more and more leading up to the election. And when we see, I think the opposition has said some remarks on this. I might touch on them on a later episode, or maybe we might discuss this more at length on the opposition podcast. But yeah, thanks for all your comments. I'll just read this last one here. From Matt. Victoria already have problems attracting businesses with some of its current policy. That's true. The policy only deters businesses further. It makes no sense when your state needs investment more than anywhere in Australia to repair your economy. I agree. My personal opinion is I agree with that. I think, even I've thought when I did have my business, would it be better just going to another state and setting it up there and running it from there? Because Victoria is very loopy and doesn't really reward entrepreneurship. The government just wants to take more and more and more from you. And really, there's this whole concept here in Victoria that somehow everything's the fault of the business owners, that class of business owners. Everything's the fault of landlords and so on. Maybe that's got something to do with the fact that a lot of these Labor government policies are more kind of socialist, communist, Marxist, whatever you want to say. And a lot of the people that support these ideas agree with people like Jacinta Allen doing this. So yeah, guys, I'm going to move on to the next story. Thanks for all your comments. Let's have a look at what I was going to bring up next, because this one, here it is. Let's just get this up and going. I think this is just a media beat up. Don't get alarmed. This is a media beat up, I believe. Like, we get these headlines now all the time, right? And let me just read this article, okay? Maybe a matter of time, chilling warning to Australians as China battles thousands of chikungunya virus cases. Chikungunya virus cases. So chikungunya virus cases. Are we going to have a chikungunya pandemic? That's what it sounds like, because chilling warning to Australia. Let's read this article. I'll just make the text bigger to make it easier. China is battling the outbreak of a virus currently untreatable with medicine in COVID-like response, but Australians have been warned it could spread here. More than 7,000 people have already been infected with chikungunya virus in Foshan, Guangdong, where mosquito nets have been placed around beds in hospital wards to protect patients. Symptoms of the virus can include fever and joint pain, headaches, muscle pain, joint swelling, and rash. Patients are required to isolate in hospitals until they either test negative to the disease or after a week following infection. This all sounds like deja vu. Chikungunya virus is spread through mosquito bites, and previous outbreaks have occurred in every populated continent except Australia. You got there someone fumigating an area. There is also a risk chikungunya, which has also previously been reported in Indian, Pacific, and Ocean Islands, can spread to other areas if travelers become affected. Now, when I was in Sri Lanka almost a month and a bit ago now, there was the chikungunya virus there as well. While the virus has popped up across Asia, the spread in China is rare, according to Deakin University Chair of epidemiology, Professor Catherine Bennett. Catherine Bennett, I remember that name from the COVID days. I think Catherine Bennett, was she one of the ones spreading misinformation? Would be worth to go back and look at that. Can't remember for sure, but that name sounds familiar. One of these so-called experts that perhaps the expertise, she may have got a lot of her predictions wrong during that time. The virus is only spread by the Aedes mosquito, but in grim news for Australians, the bug can be found in northern Queensland. As the virus is only spread by the mosquito, an infected person would need to travel to Australia before being bitten by the Aedes mosquito. The risk of local spread is low, but Professor Bennett said there has been numerous outbreaks in neighbouring countries over the last decade. We haven't yet seen it imported into Australia, but it may just be a matter of time. Supporting neighbouring countries as they battle outbreaks is the best way to keep us all safe. The virus has spread across at least 12 other cities in Guangdong, Hong Kong, reported the first case. So I'm just going to keep reading this. You get the idea. Yes, Mechanomics does say that Catherine Bennett was indeed one of the experts. Actually, both these guys here, I remember these two faces from COVID with all their wacky ideas. Look, again, this seems like a media beat up. Every time we see some new, was it monkeypox or something? Any kind of virus that comes up now in Asia or Africa or somewhere like that, it's always like, we've got to be on alert. Could be another pandemic and so on. I don't think it's risen to that type of level where people have to be alarmed, and I think the media putting these headlines out there. But it is valid to consider: would there be an overreaction to something like this in Australia? Let's say we did have the chikungunya virus pop up in Brisbane, like they're saying in Queensland, because that mosquito's there or something. Would there be an overreaction from the Australian government, given everything that we've known about why that was wrong when they did it during COVID? Would they overreact? Overwhelmingly, I still believe they would overreact. We cannot trust our governments to work in a sensible, smart way when it comes to this, and they would overreact. Just insanity of the way that they make decisions in that place. Phoebe says Gates has the whole world in his hands, farming mosquito virus, spraying agriculture, the products, the produce we eat. Yeah, I think, wasn't Bill Gates actually involved in some type of mosquito program where he's releasing mosquitoes out into the wild? I seem to remember something like this, that he was involved in something like this. Skippy the Roo says that he actually has the chikungunya virus. That's how he turned into an anthropomorphic kangaroo. So if you see Skippy the Roo out there, guys, stay away, stay clear. Otherwise, you'll have to self-isolate in your house for a couple of, what was it, 14 days? And you can work from home, though. So that works out for Jacinta Allen. You can work from home while you have the chikungunya virus. And that's always good. I caught chikungunya once. Now my joints throw a party every time it rains. Is that true? I don't know. I don't know if it's a joke. If that's true, I did see when I was traveling in Sri Lanka, I did see posters about being careful about chikungunya for sure. Stephen, this gives me a great segue actually into my next segment. Stephen here says, I'm sure the vaccine will be safe and effective. And that actually leads me into a topic I covered today on my actual breaking news on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And that was this video from Secretary Kennedy about the United States of America have now decided to cancel investments in mRNA technology and vaccine development. So let's listen to Kennedy first, and then I'll kind of talk about how this relates to Australia as well.
Your HHS Secretary. Hi, it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here, your HHS Secretary. At HHS, we have a division called the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA. BARDA drives some of our most advanced scientific research. It funds developments of vaccines, drugs, diagnostics, and other tools to fight emerging diseases and national health threats. Over the past few weeks, BARDA reviewed 22 mRNA vaccine development investments and began canceling them. Let me explain why. Most of these shots are for flu or COVID, but as the pandemic showed us, mRNA vaccines don't perform well against viruses that infect the upper respiratory tract. Here's the problem. mRNA only codes for a small part of the viral proteins, usually a single antigen. One mutation, and the vaccine becomes ineffective. This dynamic drives a phenomenon called antigenic shift, meaning that the vaccine paradoxically encourages new mutations and can actually prolong pandemics as the virus constantly mutates to escape the protective effects of the vaccine. Millions of people, maybe even you or someone you know, caught the Omicron variant despite being vaccinated. That's because a single mutation can make mRNA vaccines ineffective. The same risk applies to flu. After reviewing the science and consulting top experts at NIH and FDA, HHS has determined that mRNA technology poses more risks than benefits for these respiratory viruses.
I'm just going to pause it there. I think that's the most important phrase from that. So, what Kennedy's saying is that from the experts that they've consulted, this is the U.S. government now, like he's the Secretary of Health or whatever, the experts that they've consulted, and from studies and so on that's being done now, that as far as it goes for respiratory viruses, mRNA poses a greater risk than a benefit. So that I think that was the biggest takeaway, and that's what's obviously caught the headlines of this news now that's going around the world. So let's keep watching on.
That's why, after extensive review, BARDA has begun the process of terminating these 22 contracts totaling just under $500 million. To replace the troubled mRNA programs, we're prioritizing the development of safer, broader vaccine strategies, like whole virus vaccines and novel platforms that don't collapse when viruses mutate. Let me be absolutely clear. HHS supports safe, effective vaccines for every American who wants them. That's why we're moving beyond the limitations of mRNA for respiratory viruses and investing in better solutions. Thank you.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
So look, that's an official video from the Department of Health and Human Services. Caveat, of course, is it a caveat? What do I say to this? Disclaimer, sorry. I am not an expert, right? I'm not one of the experts, YouTube. I'm not making any broad claims. I'm just playing what the Department of Health and Human Services is saying, the government in the United States of America, what they're saying. So don't accuse me of spreading any misinformation. And the reason I'm saying that is because this was a lot of the commentary that we were seeing going back 4 or 5 years when we were having these mRNA vaccines pushed on the public, right? Multiple boosters. How many boosters are we up to now? Is it like 10 or 11? Have they made combined boosters? Is it even a thing? I've lost track of how many times we hear about boosters when it came to this. But it's a kind of a definitive statement put out. There's no sugarcoating happening here. They're saying that as far as respiratory viruses go, the U.S. government today believes that mRNA is not as poses more risks than benefits. And what does that mean for the rest of the world? Because obviously, in terms of the pharmaceutical companies, big pharma, the major player in all of that is the United States of America. Companies like Pfizer, Moderna, massive implications for them from something like this. I think it's about $500 million worth of investments into future research of that. Now, as Maconomics said, mRNA does have a broad case use cases, and he's saying here it's not ready for human use. Right. But I mean, there are other cases or development angles for mRNA use, not specifically just these type of vaccines for respiratory viruses. So it can still have broad uses, but as far as it goes for this, the US, one of the major markets for these pharmaceutical companies, are trying to go in a different directions. And when you think about the implications for a country like Australia, what does it mean for Australia? Well, I don't know if you guys remember this, but Australia Oh my god. How long have I been muted for? Did Avi hack me? Someone. Here we go. I'm back. No sound, bro. When did I lose my sound? When did I lose my sound? Because I got to go back. I feel like it was the Mossad. Maybe my threat to moderate Avi in future debates meant that the Mossad actually infiltrated my machine and muted me as a punishment. All right, let me go back. I will go back. I was just saying, as this video finished playing, I wish my wife was watching this, and then she could have told me that it's actually muted, but maybe she's watching another TV show. Maybe she doesn't want to watch my live streams. She could have just knocked on my door and let me know. I was just saying that this is an official announcement from the United States government. I'm not a expert as such. I'm not an expert in this field. So YouTube, all these platforms that may want to say that this is misinformation is coming directly from the US government, and they're basically saying that mRNA is, as far as it goes for respiratory viruses, is more risks involved with that rather than benefits, and they're not going to be involved in that at the same way that they've been in the past. So it's about $500 million worth of investments in future development of mRNA technologies that the US government wants to move away from and look for other methods when it comes to these particular vaccines. And a lot of the stuff that in the past 4 or 5 years ago that people were saying was misinformation when it relates to this, a lot of that is now turning out to be true. A lot of people have been vindicated by this decision, I believe, and for companies like Moderna and Pfizer, this has wide-ranging implications that would perhaps impact the way that they go in the future in terms of the direction of their development, of their business ideas, and so on. And the reason that I brought up this, where I believe I was talking muted, is that Victoria, Australia, the federal government, as well as the Victorian government, have made major investments into this mRNA technology, specifically for the development of vaccines in relation to respiratory viruses. That's what they discussed initially. But whether it turns out to be a bad investment or not for Victoria is yet to be seen. But more likely than not, it is definitely a question that should be hashed out, because this is happening, right? So I'm just going to read this article again. Maybe you saw me reading it as a mute just before. Southern Hemisphere's only mRNA manufacturing facility has opened in Victoria, backed by the Australian and Victorian governments, ensuring world-class mRNA vaccines and medicines can be made in Australia, creating hundreds of jobs. So again, like I said before, mRNA has multiple use cases, so it might not just, they could maybe repurpose this facility for something else. I don't know what Moderna wants to do in the future, but depending on how much this impacts their business, because the US is the biggest big pharma, the US is the biggest customer in terms of the direction of a lot of these advances in this technology. Victorian Premier Justice Alan Told was joined by Federal Minister of Health and Aged Care Mark Butler and Acting Economic Growth Minister Danny Pearson to open Moderna's cutting-edge facility at Monash University's Clayton campus, which will turbocharge the growth of Australia's sovereign mRNA manufacturing industry. The opening of Moderna's manufacturing facility in Victoria makes Australia one of the very few countries in the world, and the only country in the Southern Hemisphere, with an end-to-end mRNA manufacturing capability. So again, it's great, we have all this, but it might be redundant going into the future depending on what Moderna decides to do and how much of an impact these decisions by the US government has on these big pharmaceutical companies. So that was that story. But look, it's all kind of interlinked, right? We had the new Chikungunya virus we're talking about. And then now we've had this announcement regarding mRNA being, as far as respiratory viruses go, again, YouTube and all these other platforms. I'm not an expert. I'm just saying what the Secretary of Health in the United States of America, the government, the country in which your companies and your certain fundamental rights are meant to be protected, that the government of the United States of America has clearly come out today and said that mRNA viruses have posed more risks than benefits when it comes to respiratory illness combating vaccines. Let's have a look at what your comments are, guys. I'll bring in some of the comments here. Again, I apologize for the mic being muted. I do believe it was the Mossad. and that was in just because I had threatened to mute RV Yemeni in upcoming debates if he talked too much. So we got a lot of comments of people saying they're muted. Look, when I'm talking and looking at the camera, guys, I just can't. I don't see the comments. I got to get some sort of teleprompter so I can see the comments in front of me, so I can maybe say, I can say, I can see these comments where it's saying that the mic is actually muted. I apologize once more, guys. All right, so let's skip all those comments. We do have a super chat. I'll bring that up here from Anthony Madison. Anthony, thanks for the super chat, mate. And he says, you guessed it, Trump's fault. I do not want to blame Donald Trump for this. I do want to blame the Mossad. I think that would be more popular these days, right, Avi? You can blame the Mossad for everything. But look, yeah, thanks for the super chat, mate. And if anyone wants to support what I'm doing, you can do super chats on YouTube. That's the way to support the show and help me out if you want in that way. But regardless, I do read most of your comments. Avi's had to tell me that it's better muted. That's what a lot of people were saying. If I had muted the debate last night, people were saying it would have been a better debate if I had muted Avi Yemeni. Okay, Maconomics, thanks, mate. When Mark Butler was shown on the screen. Sorry, guys, I'm just catching up on all the comments. Let's have a look. Catherine says she was listening to me and watching another stream. Multitasking, Catherine. Judy says, yep, Moderna mRNA manufacturing in Clayton, Victoria. Hope it falls. I mean, Victoria is cesspit of all types of bad investments and things just falling apart. What about the Commonwealth Games, right? Who would have ever thought the state of Victoria, right, in Australia? I would think this is possible for like a third world country, but for the state of Victoria to put their hand up to take on the Commonwealth Games and then say, hey, we're too broke and we can't do it, and then, send it off to Glasgow or whatever, right? Whatever's happening. And we still have to pay a couple of $100 million for it as well as punishment. So it's more than possible they've made a shocking investment here when it comes to Moderna. And who really asked for it, I don't know. How was it forced onto us? What benefits did Moderna get from that deal? And, what were the checks and balances that were taken by our experts here in Australia before authorizing all of this? If now we're hearing that there was already many experts and many professionals that look at this mRNA technology as not being suitable for certain types of vaccines. I'll just read this one here. DMAC, all that money for nothing. What? The Victorian government wouldn't waste money on a thing. Here we go. That's a good comment, mate. Got this troll here. Just always loves trolling my comments. Thank you for helping with the algorithm. Yes, but the election, Commonwealth Games was an election promised by Dan the man, and just like with Jacinta, Alan, they love making these promises. So work from home we were talking about before, that could be such a promise. So let's go to the next news story, guys. I'm going to keep moving on here. I got a couple of news stories that I want to get to. This one here, staying on Victoria, right? So we've got the Premier of Victoria, I think, who is bad for our state. Then we have the loony Lord Mayor of Melbourne. So we have the double whammy here in Victoria. We have all our leaders are a bit loony. Let's just bring this one up. So let's just read this title, because I think these titles, I like these titles. People sometimes don't like sensational titles, but I think this one's apt and funny. It makes sense. Melbourne's Lord Mayor Nicholas Rees supports Indigenous six-season calendar over Northern European one. Now, you might be looking at this and you might have not heard about any of this, and you might be wondering, what are they talking about changing the calendar here in the state of, at least in Melbourne, to the Indigenous calendar that has 6 seasons over the European one, which the rest of the world uses, right, guys? We use, what is it? Summer, winter, autumn, and spring, right? We're going to go to six seasons now in Victoria. Sorry, I'm just gonna mute this individual. Let's have a look here. We'll look at muting this individual because he's just spamming the chat. Let's read this article. It makes sense Bigger. Melbourne's Lord Mayor has thrown his support behind adding 2 more seasons to the city's calendar. Lord Mayor Nicholas Rees is supporting a 6-season calendar to match Melbourne's unique weather patterns, saying they are more representative than the calendar inherited from colonization. Even the calendar that we have in terms of the seasons, even the seasons now in Melbourne are racist. This is what happens when everything becomes racist. Most of the I'm pretty sure almost all the world uses the same 4 seasons or whatever. I don't think it's a race thing, but let's keep going. Let's keep reading. In the Wurundjeri calendar, there were 6 seasons in the year, and it was a wet summer and a dry summer, a wet winter and a dry winter. And when you think about it, it makes sense. When you think about it, it makes sense. But we have gone and superimposed the 4 seasons essentially from Northern Europe here in Melbourne. They don't really match up with the weather patterns that we experience over the 12 months. Mr. Rees said that the idea was brought upon at the Melbourne 2050 Summit hosted in May, which say around 1,000 people discuss the city's future. The Lord Mayor said adopting 6-season calendar would follow Singapore's seasonal structure and said it makes sense to have a system created by Indigenous people. Does it make sense to have a system created by Indigenous people? I don't think it necessarily makes sense to have a system created by Indigenous people. That should not be the default. Like in terms of civilizations, yeah, sure, there's always indigenous civilizations, for instance, but that is not the default when we look at a lot of the standards that we apply. Sometimes the indigenous population's understanding, the way that they did things, was often limited, especially if you talk about a country like Australia, which has been isolated for a long time. Now, of course, you can have a dry summer, wet summer, you can have these distinctions, but is changing the 4 seasons that most people are used to something that really that Melbourne needs to concern itself with when there's so many other problems? Let's keep reading this. I don't want to laugh about this. I'm not laughing about the Indigenous calendar. If Indigenous people had different ways of interpreting the world around them, that's fine. But I don't see this whole concept of everything's racist, everything's a product of colonialism. So even the seasons are now racist. I don't believe that. The Lord Mayor said adopting a 6-season calendar would follow Singapore's. We read that. Aboriginal people who have lived here for tens of thousands of years, in their calendar, they had 6 seasons here in Melbourne. And when you actually look at the calendar and the seasons, you actually realize, hey, that actually does line up. This is our Lord Mayor here. 6 News meteorologist Rob Sharp told Sky News a 6-season proposal may not align with the country's current climate. The only concern about it is Indigenous people, they had their 6 seasons off their lived experiences in colder climates. Seasons are changing, and you see this with fall season in Japan that seems to change and start a month earlier. However, the 6 seasons climate may be better for Melbourne. Sharp added a 5-season calendar which more closely reflects antipodean cycles in weather and plant and animal activity made a good amount of sense. Look, guys, maybe there is a discussion to be had here. I don't know. I just think there's just far more important things that the Mayor of Melbourne needs to be focused on than adding an Indigenous calendar or extra seasons into the Melbourne. Like we got Melbourne is pretty run down, and I know the city's kind of coming back to life again, and there's a lot more activity happening. When we compare it to the the months or the years following COVID. But I don't think this is the type of thing that we want the Lord Mayor concerning his time and efforts with. What do you think in the comments? Do you think that they should be worried about the racist seasons here in Australia? Because now everything's racist. The seasons are also racist. Do you think that will change and make the city of Melbourne better if we have the less racist Indigenous calendar? Because apparently everything Indigenous apparently is better. No, just anything Indigenous apparently is just overrides everything else, and apparently that's the best way to do it, which I don't agree with. I think this is ridiculous. But yeah, John says, "End of the world is coming. The ring of fire is gonna blow." Judy says, "What the f difference will it make?" I agree. Spicy says, "Important question, was Murali a chaka?" I don't look. I believe that he did have those imperfections born into his arm. So yes, his action would somewhat be questionable, but if it's a a limitation of the way that he was born, maybe we can be a bit more open to that being not chucking. He's not a meteorologist. Where's Jane Bunn? Pretty sure the seasons are based on agricultural reasons, going back to before the Aboriginals. I just think like the 4 seasons thing is fine. Like it's not something that. Have you ever woken up one day and in the last couple of years and gone, hey, what I would really what I would really like is for 6 seasons, and then the bins would be taken out on time. There would be less potholes, and it would be safer to walk around the city with less junkies stabbing me. If only we had 6 seasons. Like no one has actually thought about this till the Lord Mayor has come up with this idea that somehow we're now racist for having just 4 seasons and not having the Aboriginal seasons. That's the truth. That's what I think. Climate change is just weather, said every billionaire on the private jet to a climate summit. True, true, true. Gap Media, fix the homelessness in the city first. It's out of control. Yes, I think the homeless would not necessarily be transfixed on whether there's 6 seasons or not. Just the fact that they're actually out there living in the wilderness most times, out there in the elements and experiencing the seasons because of their homelessness. I think that is definitely a more important issue that the government or the local councils should be dealing with. Spicy, of course. I'll try to answer anything. I'm not worried about that. I mean, yeah, as someone with Sri Lankan heritage, yeah, like it's growing up, it was like, oh, they're calling Murali a chaka, like, oh, like everyone was kind of offended, and but I think back then, I liked it back then. I liked a bit of the argy bargy and calling people names on the cricket field, and a bit of the tensions, a bit of the racial tensions, even sometimes between the two cricketing nations, not just Sri Lanka, just all these are different nations. Since the IPL, I can't watch the cricket because it's so boring. Now that all these players know each other, they all pat each other on the back and they're all mates. It's very boring. So it was a lot more entertaining when, yeah, Daryl Hare and these other umpires back in the day were calling the Sri Lankan ballers chuckers. It was definitely a bit more spicy going to the cricket games, just to use your name. Let's get a super chat here from Abby. Thanks, Abby, for the super chat and constantly supporting both my show and the opposition podcast. I hope Avi is watching to see the super chat come through. Words are failing me. Stupid does not cut it 100%. It is just a stupid waste of time. Did you know there's only 2 seasons in the north? Look, I believe you. That's probably the case, just because of the extreme climates. When you say the north, are you saying like the North Pole or something like this? I'm not exactly sure. I'm not a weather expert. I'm just saying, like, at least as far as Australia goes, I think since the establishment of Australia, we've had 4 seasons. It's not really caused major dramas for anyone. It's not really caused racism towards anyone. I don't think we need the Indigenous calendar for this. What will the other 2 seasons be called? What months will they be in? I think they're saying a wet summer and a dry summer. So it's pretty much just adding wet or dry in front of, or whatever it was. I read it before. Spicy. I think we're doing this live dating type thing, whatever you're trying to do, trying to hit on people that do super chats. I love Abby. She super chats enough for me too. Thanks, mate. Darwin only has wet and dry. Well, there you go. There you go. I do accept that there are parts of the country where the climate itself is more predisposed to certain conditions. Like, when you're in, for instance, when I was traveling in Sri Lanka for a holiday, it's mostly just hot. There's no such thing. Like, there's no winter as such, but there is a colder season. I get that. Let's keep going. I'll go to the next article now, guys. Thank you so much for joining in the conversations. This one here, topic I touch on a lot, which is around migration. So, look, I think this is going to piss people off. Unfortunately, they would have thought perhaps that Labor was listening to a lot of the disagreements that people are having out there in the public around migration, especially mass migration, and we would have perhaps less migration because of this. But what we are seeing is that Labor is actually going to increase certain migration by increasing the cap on the number of international students that come from Southeast Asia, it seems. So, there'll be more people walking around that look like me. I apologize if that offends you. But let's have a read of this article and see what the Labour Party is planning. Bring it up. Labour confirms international student cap will rise with focus on Southeast Asia. Let's make this bigger. The international student cap in Australia will increase from next year with an extra 25,000 placements on offer for universities. The Albanese government has announced this week that 295,000 places, up from 270,000, will be available after it was forced to limit enrollments in 2024 due to the record migration that some claim led to a spike in home and rental prices. So there'll be an additional 25,000 students coming on top of, right? So with all these issues that we're having, students from Southeast Asia will be prioritized in ongoing efforts to boost engagement with the region, a close strategic partner of Australia. So I believe that is possibly China and India. Universities will receive the same allocation next year as they did in 2025 and can apply to have their allotment increased if they can prove domestic and international students have access to safe and secure housing, and schools increase engagement with Southeast Asia. Now, the universities are very dodgy. I have seen the living conditions of a lot of these international students. Like when you were growing up, like when I was, starting uni and stuff, going to law school, there were placements available. Like you do international study, right? You can travel to the UK or to some university in America and stay in a dorm or something, or stay in some nice place, and you do international study. And it seems like these international students, from the perception that I see from people talking about it, come to Australia and then they rent a whole house or a whole apartment and so on. But many of the international students that I personally know and have personally seen, it is almost like not what's the word? The conditions that they're living in is like these like share houses where there's like 7 to 10 people living in them, and it's like rough conditions. It is tough, and I don't believe the universities can prove that international and domestic students have access to safe and secure housing. I don't believe they live in. Maybe it's safe and maybe it's secure, but I don't think it's like proper living conditions that these international students are having to go through. Many of them. Now, there are exceptions to this, and there are people that are coming to this country, international students who are coming from wealthy families, and I've seen them rent whole apartments and so on. That does happen. But many students are not in a position to have access to something like that. So, look, there is a troll that has not stopped. As much as I like to feed the trolls, I am getting requests from people to stop this particular troll. Let's have a look at what we can do to this individual that continues to just troll non-stop. Let's have a look what we can do to this particular individual. I'm a very fair and reasonable person when it comes to this, and I don't want to, I don't enjoy censorship. I do like people to have a say, and even if they don't agree with me, to have a say. But it does, like what Billy's saying here, it does piss people off, and it does actually, make the environment a lot nastier for everyone else. So let's have a look what we can do about this. Maybe I gotta get moderators on at some point, right? Get some moderators on, because there's a lot of enemies here, enemies of Rukshan, and sadly many enemies of Yavi Yemeni that come looking for me as well. So I got a double whammy. People don't like me. All right, that's fine. Come troll me, but I do have a lot of the people that don't like Avi Yemeni as well that troll me, because I think Avi does just block him. Yeah, is that right, Avi? If you're still watching, you just block him, right? Block hammer straight away. But let's see. Maybe I've limited this person. And look, you saw me. I was very fair. I let that person continue on with their nonsense, but it just got too much. Yeah. His Greek handle translates to danger, danger. Let's have a read of the rest of this article. International students moved from secondary schools in Australia to publicly funded universities at TAFE are exempt from the cap. Education Minister Jason Clare said the international student education sector is an incredibly important export to Australia, but the growth has to be managed to ensure its sustainability. International education doesn't just make us money, it makes us friends, he said. Yeah, Viv, the slug has been limited. So hopefully, these slugs, they do come back in other life forms. So let's see what they try to do. This is about making sure international education grows in a way that supports students and universities and the national interest. The new planning and the new planning level gives the sector certainty to continue delivering a high quality educational experience to international students while addressing national priorities. Again, I don't believe any of this nonsense. These universities are rotting the system, I think, and like there is no way that these students are in adequate housing. Of course, it's putting pressure on the housing market as well. But a lot of these students are in just the most derelict of conditions, living, in small rooms, maybe 2-3 people at once. And I just don't think they can guarantee it. And I've had first-hand experience talking to these individuals, and a lot of these universities still, it's just like fake degrees, and fake in the sense of they're just paying to get to Australia, do certain degrees, and try to get residency here. This is a lot of what's going on, and the universities do not care so much about what impacts it has on the Australian public. For instance, it doesn't care about what impacts it has on working families and Aussie kids, right? Let's put it that way. They don't care about what impacts. The government doesn't care. They just trying to make money off these international students. And I don't necessarily always blame the international students. Like if this offer was put to you in an overseas country, that you had an opportunity to pay whatever it is to come to Australia, and you had to, live in this little house with a few other people for a couple of years. You paid the Australian government and the universities a bit of money, and that was kind of like a pathway. And whatever that was, as tough as it is a lot better than whatever conditions they're leaving behind in that country. A lot of these types of people will come and then try to game the system to stay here. And you can't necessarily blame them, but the exploitative system is actually designed and created by the Australian government and the universities. That's why you're seeing they're so hungry for it, that even though we're having all these debates about mass migration in the community, and all sorts of people are pissed off about the impacts potentially of mass migration, that the government is still willing to say, hey, we've got to increase the numbers, right? We've got to increase the cap. We've got to let more students in, right? It's because of these economic considerations that they have. They don't really look at the wider social issues that come with this. And it's more about increasing the profit margins and making sure the universities are happy, which is a problem. I think it's a problem. Arthur Morgan says Uber Eats drivers, yes. Look, I know a lot of these type of individuals. They do work very hard. They're usually working multiple jobs to make ends meet, because even for them to pay the rents of some of these places that they're squashed into is very high. To pay the rents and to pay the fees to study. So everyone's being exploited in this system. Like the students are being exploited, and the Australian public is being exploited. And really, the people who are doing the exploiting is not so much the students. It's really the governments here and the university systems and the broader educational systems, which have allowed for these. You see all these kind of colleges and stuff pop up, right? It's like all over the place, and they've just made education something that was like prized and important and valuable in the past, right? That we have to, for instance, as Australian students, go through a lot with our VC or our all that kind of stuff. They've made this kind of commodity that they can exploit on the most sometimes helpless individuals overseas that are looking for a way out of their countries to come here. So everyone is being exploited, and again, I blame the Australian government and the university system and the education system. Let's have a look at some of your comments around this. The slug will return as a turtleneck. I can just imagine that slug, that Greek slug, coming up with a new name and making a new Facebook account because they just want to come here and put the same nonsense. Yeah, look, thanks, Ted. I have had a few offers from people that want to moderate, and I will definitely look into that going down in the future. The best and the brightest. I don't believe the best and the brightest are coming from overseas, unfortunately, to study in Australia. I don't believe it's the best and the brightest. Often it is people who can put together money to get here. There are many ways that certificates and the tests and so on can be faked. The only thing that they really need to do is to get into this country, and once you're here, there are numerous ways that these students, like these educational institutions, and the people that are running there are also running scams, and they're taking cash payments. They're forging documents and they're forging grades and marks, and it's just a whole rort. It is actually a rort. It's been exposed many times. It's really hard to untangle it all because the government in this country protects it and the university sector protects it as well. But I don't blame the students. I don't blame the people coming from overseas. It's a Ponzi scam that will burst sooner than rather than later. Look, I hope it all bursts and falls apart, because I think it is pushing down the standard of the university systems here in Australia as well. Like, it's actually impacting, I think, local students that sometimes end up in some of these same degrees and courses, when they are in courses with people that aren't really there to be a part of that course. Like, one of the things about university, well, traditionally was that you finish school, you go to this kind of intellectual place, even a tech place. You go there and you meet other people that have the same interests, right? You're studying together. You might come up with a great idea with someone else, and I think it's less likely for that to happen when you just have universities scamming people. Yep, I agree with Judy. Coming here to study is just a backdoor to immigration permanency. Yeah, it has become like that. There are definitely legitimate students. There are a lot of smart people that come to Australia as well to study, but overwhelmingly, the government is after the cash, right? They're after the money, so that broadens their scope. Gap Media says we have a housing crisis. Rents are crazy, and they want to bring in more international students in. It's absolutely crazy. What are the government thinking? Yeah, I mean, Labor won, in a Labor landslide. So the government's thinking they have a mandate. Ben says the education institutions in Australia are more concerned about the woke agenda. I mean, that's a totally other problem altogether. Definitely, they're to blame for a lot of things that are wrong in this country. And I think a lot of things that are actually going to be wrong in this country in the coming decade, because the standard of, teachers that are coming out of these educational institutes, even the standard of students that are coming out who are very much hyper focused on issues that are not really relevant to Australia, like their worldviews have been completely warped. I think they're going to find adjusting to normal society with everyone else who's maybe a bit more normal very difficult. But they actually have the power in terms of numbers and clout. So let's see what happens with that. Yeah, they wonder why people are pissed, but they don't care that people are pissed. Rukshan, are you saying mass immigration is on purpose? That's a conspiracy. Look, I don't think mass immigration per se is on purpose in the way that people frame it as the great replacement. But is the impacts of mass immigration creating these type of conditions with other things which are happening in society, like the failing birth rates and the lack of the family unit, for instance, in the West that we have, and especially the falling birth rates amongst white Europeans around the world. Altogether, does it have this kind of it looks like the great replacement? Yeah, I do agree with that. Is it happening on purpose? Not to the extent I think people are making it out as a conspiracy, but there's definitely pushes and elements within the world that want to exploit individuals and peoples, and they don't really care about the national identity or what happens to the country as long as they can make a quick buck. Yeah, Judy, fair enough, Rukshan. Don't blame those who migrate because they have access to a good deal and our welfare, but then they shouldn't cry when one day we get the right to ship, get right this ship and offload the extra passengers. Yeah, I mean, I get the sentiment. I definitely get the sentiment. It's just I don't believe that that's happening. Overwhelmingly, when you see the electorates now and the way that Labor wins elections and the demographic shifts in Australia, and this is citizens who can vote, overwhelmingly these are people who are more sympathetic to the messaging around this being a racist thing, right? And I'm going to get to that as well, because the next story I have really I'm going to keep moving. David says, do you talk English? I do talk the King's English, David Harry. Clean, I do talk English. Maybe I'm talking a little bit too fast for you. Let me know, guys, if I'm talking too fast and you don't understand. I do tend to go off on a bit of a tangent sometimes when I'm talking, but let's have a look at this guy. Now, this is not my brother. This is not my cousin. This is not my cousin, but this is actually the Race Discrimination Commissioner here in Australia on a 400k salary. And he was on Meet the Press today. And this is what I'm talking about, the changing demographics of this country. Now, you might look at this guy and be like, well, what business does he have about talking about race discrimination? And wouldn't, of course, like if your job was the Race Discrimination Commissioner, are you going to come out and say that there's no racism? Like, are you going to do that? It just doesn't fit with the job security of that particular job, right? Because literally, you are in a job where you are trying to find racism, and I just don't. It just makes sense to me that this individual, of course, sees racism in everything, and a lot of his statements throughout the years since he's been in this position comes across like that. So he was on Meet the Press, I believe, on the ABC. You can watch that episode on the ABC, and hear his whole talk. But let's just have a look at this article from the SBS. Right, SBS eats this stuff up. And look, there might be some truth to this as well. Let's have a look at this. So, according to the Racial Discrimination Commissioner, Giridhan Sivaraman is urging a new approach to tackle racism. The war in Gaza has triggered a terrifying surge of racism, according to the Racial Discrimination Commissioner, who urged the government to act in a speech on Wednesday afternoon. His name? Giridhan Sivaraman and his team at the Australian Human Rights Commission has found communities in Australia have felt dehumanised amid the conflict in the Middle East. In an address to the National Press Club on Wednesday afternoon, Sivaraman urged the government to act on several recommendations to combat racism. You can see how Australianized I am, guys. I actually have difficulty reading certain South Asian names. Now, people might look at that and be like, Rukshan, what's wrong with you? But, it's not common for me. Let's just get rid of this blur. Each experience of racism is unique to the victim, but the fact remains more people are being harmed in these ways than before, Sivaraman said in his speech. Equating racism, Sivaraman described the world as going through feeble times. The war in Gaza has triggered a terrifying surge of anti-Semitism, anti-Arab racism, anti-Palestinian racism, and Islamophobic hate. Mentioning those different forms of racism doesn't mean equating them. Mentioning one doesn't invalidate the another. The ARHC, I'm just going to skip some of this because it's just going about Gaza. The federal funded initiative has found these communities feel dehumanized and stripped of their humanity when suffering is not recognized at home or overseas. When the massacre of Jews and Israelis by Hamas on October 7th is not acknowledged, it dehumanizes them and by extension, Jewish and Israeli Australians, he said. When the devastation caused by Israel in Gaza, the deaths of 118,000 children, mass starvation, the destruction of homes is ignored, it dehumanizes Palestinians and by extension Palestinian, Arab and Muslim Australians who identify with them. Israel has consistently rejected allegations. Recommendations for the government. Sivaraman has said he believes some government approaches pit communities against each other rather than fostering shared solutions. He flagged the AHRC's National Anti-Framework, which he said comes at a crucial calls for several major legal and policy changes, such as the introduction of a national framework with a 10-year commitments that include acknowledgement of the systemic and structured nature of racism and historical and ongoing impacts of settler colonialism on First Nations people. Now, this is where we come to the crux of what these guys are talking about. They'll talk about these issues today, but it goes back to this historical and ongoing impacts of settler colonization on First Nations peoples and the systemic and structural nature of racism. This is what they actually want to push as a issue out into the public. All that other stuff about Gaza, Israel, anti-Semitism is all fluff. It's all about this. 9 months since its release, the AHRC is still waiting for a commitment from the federal and state governments. Bill Ralph, a senior advisor to the Australian National Imams Council, said it's heartless and unrealistic to expect Australian communities not to feel affected by overseas conflict. I think the framework that's been put forward and the key points that have been made are well-founded, and it's something that I agree with. Efforts to combat racism must be First Nations centered. I'm just going to let that sit for a second. So efforts to combat racism must be First Nations centered. The framework would also include an agreed upon national definition of racism for Indigenous people. There can be no real racial justice in Australia without justice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. That's why the anti-national racism framework and all efforts to combat racism in Australia must be First Nations centered. We cannot fix a problem without addressing its root cause, and every manifestation of racism in this country stems from the original violence against First Nations people. So I'm just going to pause that there. So you see how it all comes back, right? So we can't address racism without accepting that Australia is a racist country. It's pretty much what is being said here, right? And or everything, like to fix all the problems in Australia, according to the racial commission, racial discrimination commissioner or whatever he is, who happens to be, right? He's not a white dude, right? Apparently Australia is so racist that this, other Indian or Sri Lankan dude has ended up as a racial discrimination commissioner, right? Explain that one to me. Is now saying that the only way that this can be solved, this racist country where he's now the commissioner getting 400k a year, the only way that we can solve this is by accepting that Australia is a racist country because of its history, whatever that means. Now we know over the last couple of decades, there's been many attempts. The sorry, the whole big thing with sorry by Kevin Rudd, and so on, right? There's all these apologies and so on. What has that achieved? I don't think it's achieved anything for anyone, honestly. I don't think it matters to the extent that it's been, put as a prominent way that we can tackle racism, for instance, in this country. Wouldn't it be great if these individuals just said, the way that we can tackle racism in Australia is by having a shared national identity as Australians? As an example, I'm not saying that's the way. I'm just saying as an example, if all these people that are here, apparently multiculturalism, which is I think problematic, if all these people just kind of get behind the Australian flag and our national identity, and we're just all Australians that look out for each other, I think that would go a long, long way compared to something like this, which is about recognizing the racism of the colonizer settling in Australia, which no one alive today has anything to do with. By far, the conditions for Indigenous Australians is compared to anything else around the world, really, is up there in terms of the way that this country looks to address the problems of the past, whether it's to special exemptions, when it comes to study, when it comes to certain welfare programs, and so on. Like the efforts that Australia has gone to address this, I think is just up there with any other country in the world that have had these similar types of issues. And to still today be claiming that, somehow we have to do something that recognizes something that no one was responsible for that's live today will all of a sudden automatically fix racism. I don't believe it. Like, do you believe this nonsense? I don't believe it. Like, efforts to combat racism must be First Nation centered. Like, do you really believe that if some reason Australia had solved its historical issues of racism, like this guy is saying, when it comes to Indigenous people, that today there wouldn't be, Arabs, Muslims, and Jews and so forth, divided on the issue that's happening in the Middle East? No, it's totally unrelated. So the way that this is framed as something that, we can only have racial justice in Australia and racial, in terms of not have issues in Australia is by addressing the past is not true. Like the racism that we're seeing as it relates to the issue in the Middle East is a part of a blood feud that has been happening for thousands and thousands of years in many instances. And no amount of recognition of Indigenous suffering or racism in Australia by everyone, by saying sorry or whatever they want us to do, will solve that. So this is just further ways for these type of individuals to keep their paychecks going, call everyone a racist. Again, I don't agree with this guy. He looks like me. He's not my cousin, I promise. But increasingly, people with this kind of ideological slant are the ones who hold the levers of power in this country when it comes to these issues. And they are the ones who are destabilizing our societies, making us hate this country, creating the conditions really for what the government's doing, like exploiting us with the universities, bringing in more migrants, and so on. And there's not much really that we can do to push back against it directly. I don't think so. It really comes down to the fact that we have to have a shared national identity. And I know lots of people don't agree with me on that one. They're like, we don't want to have a shared national identity with you, Rukshan. It doesn't matter how much you love Australia or the Australian flag. It doesn't matter. We don't want to have anything to do with you because you're brown. So get out of the country, right? There's attitude, and okay, say all of that what you want, but the people who are pulling the levers of power and have influence in this country and are changing this country, in many instances, are now really in the driver's seat and coming up with this type of nonsense. And a lot of it's just lies. A lot of it's just ideological. And a lot of it just helps to just destabilize this country and push through their agenda. And it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. Like, we will always have a racial discrimination commissioner. Like, do you even need that? Do you even need that? Really, in Australia, when you compare it to other parts of the world, I don't think so. Anyway, let's have a look at your comments, guys. I've kind of gone on a bit of a rant. Hope I made sense with some of the thoughts that I was sharing around that. Let's have a look at what you guys say about my cousin there, who's the racial discrimination commissioner. Again, full disclosure, he's not my cousin. Let's have a look. Is he working from home? Is he working from home? I don't know. It's not but I reckon he's working from home. He's working from home. I think he's working from home. He looks like he would like working from home. That's my personal opinion. He's working from home. uh, Someone says we need more Uber drivers. Nothing wrong with driving an Uber. Nothing wrong with driving an Uber. Must be a local. Billy Biggie says, "I don't care, and I won't be made to feel ashamed about the net zero scam or the immigration invasion. It's the cost of the living crisis, so I wouldn't care less what they want to say. Never be ashamed." That's true. They'll always find ways to, make people feel ashamed to say what they want to say. I get that. I think there's, ways that people definitely can express themselves. Judy says, us whiteys are feeling racism. We are often hated. I do agree that there is intense scrutiny of white Europeans, white Australians, for instance, when you look at Australia. And a lot of that is actually by design, of course. But you have to understand that there's many people, especially many immigrants, that don't agree with that. Like, these people don't speak for all of us. But the institutions, things like this racial discrimination commissioner, the mainstream media, and so on, push this type of worldview out there. We saw that recently, right, with the American Eagle ad, just because they had, what's that, the actress's name, Sweeney, and she was wearing some jeans, and she said she's got good jeans. Like, that was like the big issue, right? Big problem because a white person said they have good genes, even if they meant something else. It doesn't really matter. Like, who cares? Like, no one cares about that stuff. Really, they shouldn't care about those things. This attractive young woman who happens to be white saying that she has good genes. Who cares? But that's been made into such an issue. It's about the racism in society and the hatred of others and so on. So it's this ridiculous world that we live in. But that's more of a Western problem. I try to explain this to people. These kind of insane things that you're seeing do not necessarily happen outside of the West, right? It doesn't happen in that way outside of the West. It's not a normal thing. Race discrimination commissioner, everything is racist. Sex discrimination commissioner doesn't know what a woman is. That's true. That is so true. Like I said, of course, the race discrimination commissioner is going to find racism. His job literally depends on there being racism. So he'll always forever be tackling racism as he gathers more funds for his departments, right, or whoever else it is in the future. How come Australians are the ones being condemned for not caring about what's happening on the other side of the world? That's true. Like, we shouldn't be condemned for what's happening in the Middle East. Even if you're an Australian that cares little to zero about what's going on in there, even if it's the loss of human life and you don't care as an Australian, people in this country shouldn't be condemned. Because I'll tell you, like, there's people in other parts of the world, even in the Middle East, when something's happening in Australia, they don't care. They don't care. No one cares, right? It's all parts of the world that's suffering, and we're told what to care about and what's important. And the truth is, the first and most important thing for any nation to care about is its own nation, its own people, its citizens. That is the fundamental, most important thing. And the countries that do that the best tend to be more successful. history shows that tends to be more successful. This thing that we're doing today, it's not working out in the way that they're selling it. It's probably the best way I can put it. The wrong side won the war. I'm not going to get into that, but I'll take that as a statement. That's the guy. That's the type of guy that if you say white or milk in your coffee straight black, he'll say that's racist to keep his job. Yeah, I do remember, like during the crazy era of the Democrats, we did have articles like how milk is racist, because it's white. Crazy crap like that, right? DMAX says being white or caring only about Australia makes you racist or some phobic person who doesn't care. Not true. Judy says, what do they want? Pull down all infrastructure. Us colonists built. Yeah, I mean, this is what doesn't make sense. Like, in terms of what the West built in the places that they did colonize, that infrastructure has actually stood the test of time in many instances and led to the improvement of many of these societies. So, this whole thing about colonization being bad, yes, of course, there are bad aspects of this. This is to be expected. But not all of it is bad, right? It's like this. It just doesn't make sense. And I truly believe that whether it's the Japanese or the Chinese or some other Asian continent would have eventually got to Australia, and it would have been far worse, right? Even if the Spanish or the French got here, it would have been far worse than the British getting here. The British were by far, one of the more, I guess, and look, there's a lot of bad notes here as well. But they were by far, in terms of colonizers go, they were far better than, for instance, the Spanish and how they went about things when they colonized, what we know today as Latin America. What do we have here? First Nation, what's the nation? Yeah, apparently there's 700 nations. And look, I don't want to get too much into that. Let's keep going, guys. Thank you for all the comments so far. I do have a few more to get through. I hope you're enjoying. This is Rukshan on X, where I chat with you guys. I bring up news articles and stories. I take your comments on board and I try to, I don't want to drift off from what I'm talking about, but I love bringing in the comments because I think that kind of drives the conversation in different areas that I might have not thought of before I started this. There's literally no planning that goes into these shows. So if you think I've researched anything I'm talking about, a lot of the times, the first time I'm reading the article is when I'm reading it with you. But, if you enjoy that type of content, guys, make sure you hit subscribe. You can follow me on YouTube, on X, Facebook, and a few other platforms as well, at The Real Rukshan. You can see it on the bottom here. It says at The Real Rukshan, so that's what you got to type, and make sure you're following me on the platform that you prefer to watch on. And if you want, you can do super chats. I think I've read all the super chats that have come in today. We got one from Ted. Let's read Ted's super chat. Ted says, Jesus said on his dying cross to the Indigenous, don't do anything until I come back. I will take that as a statement, Ted. Yep, I will take that as a statement. If I look at what Jesus wants for all of us, I think he wants all of us to be happy and live in peace and harmony. And, I think institutions sometimes get in the way of that. Story of Jesus shows you how institutions, even, the Jewish institutions at the time, the Roman institutions at the time, got in the way of the message of Jesus. So I think inherently we're good people. We want to get along with everyone. We don't want to have problems. Everyone just wants to have a roof over their head, have, safety and all these things that we want as humans and as people. Everyone kind of wants the same thing. But when you introduce other factors around you, it doesn't matter who you are, if you're just, average everyday person or Jesus Christ, when institutions get involved, there's other drama that, envelops your world and your lives. But yeah, I'll take that as a statement. I did add a bit of my own comments to that. So next story, guys, that I want to talk about, let me just flick through to it. I think I'll skip a couple of the stories that I had because we've kind of gone on for a bit too long. This one, I'd love to get your opinion on this because my mind is a little bit changed since going to Canberra. But let me read this. This is about travel for politicians, and there was a push to make sure that they only travel economy class. Let's have a look at this. Economy class mandate for taxpayer-funded travelers not appropriate, says government. Public servants will continue to fly in style after the Albanese government rejected a plan to restrict premium travel on shorter journeys. A recommendation that the public servants be made to travel economy on flights under 3 hours has been rejected by the government in response to a review of travel policy. The review was published late on Friday after being finalized by the Department of Finance in December. 7 recommendations were made in an effort to reduce expenditure on taxpayer-funded travel and ensure the lowest practical fare is selected when booking flights. This included recommendations to set economy class as a standard class of travel for all travelers, including SES officers on flights less than 3 hours in duration on domestic and international flights, but the government said it would not mandate the use of economy class travel. The current settings are appropriate, it said in response. Other recommendations around the acceptance of upgrades, booking early, online bookings, and greater transparency in reporting of travel bookings will be taken into considerations ahead of the release of new travel policy next year. So this is really around how politicians travel, and the government's kind of going to keep everything the same. Now, I've seen Canberra from the other side, and I think politicians actually get a bit of flack for all the other problems that we have in the world that they've often created. But I do think their working conditions are quite rigorous and quite tough. And I know we can't compare it to the everyday person, and we want to have some sort of equality as well, and we don't want these people to be overpaid and wasting taxpayer funds. But the standards of Australian Airlines has really dropped. Like traveling economy sometimes is quite difficult, especially depending like I think certain government workers or politicians perhaps. I understand perhaps why they don't want to be in economy as well, and away from people, because there are like crazy people now in our society, right? And that's why maybe these politicians stay in lounges and things like this. I kind of see it from that perspective now after being in politics and covering these issues for a long time and seeing how the public perhaps reacts to some of these issues. We want our politicians to be well paid. We want them to have the best facilities to do their job because they're doing the job for the country and for the people. And we want them to be, respected for doing that. Often the problem is that a lot of them abuse that trust and abuse that relationship. And that's where the anger comes in from people. So naturally, I think, yeah, and someone's saying this is for bureaucrats. I understand. That's what Julie's saying, is for bureaucrats. I'm just talking in general because this all comes back to the people's perception of politicians in general and bureaucrats. I think there are some instances where we have to want these people who are working for us to have the best possible, rest and, get to meetings quickly and all of that. I kind of get it from that worldview perspective now after seeing it from the other end, because it is very demanding, a lot of the stuff that goes on there. But having said that, often the treatment that we get from politicians makes us, dislike them, makes us want them to, suffer. It makes us want them not to be, getting these type of benefits, for instance, because, look at us, we're suffering, right? There has to be a balance. And someone saying that I'm too nice, look, I would be someone that in the past would have said, screw these politicians, right? I don't want to use swear words, or screw these bureaucrats, but you want the people running your country and acting in the best interest of your country to be, in the best possible space when they're negotiating on behalf of decisions that can impact your life. You want them to be, fresh. You want them to have access to the best possible resources to fight for you in Canberra or in state government, wherever it is. You really that should be a standard. You should want that. But again, I understand where people come from because they've lost that trust. You want to attract really good people into this space, into politics, and you want to reward them for serving the country. There should be that fine balance, right? We got to find that balance. So I just brought it up because I thought it'd be interesting, because I have seen it from the other side, and it is, even for someone like me that doesn't do any kind of extravagant work like that as a bureaucrat or anything like this, right? I do see how much of a struggle it is sometimes, the hours that are put into this, and a lot of the policy work that goes into this, and a lot of the, now you might laugh at this, and I'm going to say a lot of the suffering that goes into getting all this stuff done. I can kind of see that taking place. It is a bit of a hard, thankless job that these people get involved in, but they have created that. They have created this dislike of them, and it is up to politicians now to obviously to change that. Now, do I think realistically it will ever change? Probably not. Probably not. That relationship has been soured for many obvious reasons. But Here we go. We've got John here saying politicians get paid to look after us, the people. They get paid well to sit on their ass. They should be paid. They should be paid any other allowances. If Albanese had a spine, he'd probably list it as out of stock like everything else in Australia. Rukshan, do you remember Ted Bullpitt's Aussie comedy amusing? No, I think it rings a bell. I'll look that up. It's true, yeah. Our current politicians have forgotten who they serve. It is a privilege. I definitely agree. It's a privilege to represent your people. I was just trying to say that we should want our politicians to have the best resource available. Like they're representing us on the world stage as well, and they're fighting for us. Technically, all these bureaucrats and policymakers. So you want them to have the best resources and the best equipment and so on. I believe in that. At the core of it, I believe in that. Like it shouldn't be a dysfunctional government that doesn't have access to what the other side has, right? Because if you've seen like the facilities, for instance, that we're up against sometimes when you talk about the US politicians or the Chinese or the Indian and so on, I mean, they completely abuse the system. Like whatever's happening in Australia is nothing like the abuse of the people that happens in the political system. I mean, there are a lot more checks and balances here. Could improve. Yeah, DMAX says they're lining their old pockets. Yeah, definitely feels like that sometimes. We have a victim economy in Australia. Under Albo, the only thing getting lifted in Australia is the tax rate and our blood pressure. That's true. I mean, look, these guys do definitely piss all of us off. I am not discounting that. I just thought it was an interesting article that I wanted to bring up just to share my other perspective from it, from seeing it from the other side. I'm not saying that I have any access to any of these privileges like this in the work that I do. I don't, trust me. I'm in economy. It's more so I can see, like, after being there in Canberra, even for the couple of years I've been going back and forth, I look at it and go, wow, you really have to want to do this job to be here with everything that's put on you in terms of the pressure, the abuse, the hatred. And there is a lot of that depending on who you are. Now, maybe not for Albanese, maybe not for all these liberal, big shots, maybe not for them, but there is a bit of sacrifice that goes into it. Let's move on, guys. Let's end with a fun article. And that is Donald Trump. Let's bring him up. My favorite, Donald Trump. Let's go Trump. Let's get rid of the blur here. I love Donald Trump, obviously, and he's just great. It's just this video of him on the White House roof today is just so good. And it's 35 seconds. I'm gonna play it. Let's have a look. I can play it.
Mr. President, what do you want to build? What are you trying to build? Sir, you approve? You saying more missiles? Are you building missiles? What? Come on, Dad.
Did you say missiles?
Taking over all of Gaza, sir.
It's so funny. Like, this is the president of the United States of America. He's randomly appeared on the top of the White House on the roof. He's walking through. There's a press pack, the crazy mainstream media press pack, yelling from across the lawn, "Mr. President, what are you doing?" And, Trump is telling them that he's there to build missiles, nuclear missiles, and he does a few hand gestures. There's more videos of this as well. And it's quite hilarious. I want to end on a light note as I complete this show. We'll just let that play in the background while I get a few more super chats. Not super chats, sorry, just a few more of the comments up here. And thank you guys for that did do the super chats today. Thank you, I appreciate it. Let's have a look at some of the comments. David, who's very keen to get me deported. I hope you get deported. Yes, you can keep working towards that, mate. DMAX says nuclear missiles. Apparently, that's what he meant. Billy McGee says Libs won't get anywhere either until they oppose every Labour policy. Yes, the Liberal Party does come across as Labour light in many instances. Catherine, I do agree with you. Trump does have a great sense of humor, often misunderstood. DMAX says, I love Trump. You love Trump. And Billy, Trump is the best leader and president in the world and in history, love or hate. Look, Trump will definitely go down as one of those, kind of like how we talk about Abraham Lincoln, or we talk about, these great, Roosevelt or JFK. Trump is that. If someone asked you about every single U.S. president, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know their names. We don't know. There's just key names that we know, and Trump is that. 100, 200, 300 years from now, they will be talking about the legacy of Donald J. Trump. Hate him or love him, he is a consequential president when it comes to United States of America, and of course, world politics as well. I don't think there's been anyone like him in the past, and there will probably never be anyone like him in the future. But maybe we thought about other presidents like that, or other leaders like that, and maybe there will be a Trump like that in the future. Maybe Baron Trump will come along and be just like his father and even funnier. But guys, thanks so much for joining in today. Got one more comment here from Ben. Well, at least Trump represents his country, while Albo represents a globalist agenda. Very much so. I think you can see Albo is always in lockstep with what the UK are doing, for instance, what Canada's doing, what France is doing, for instance. Whereas Trump is very individualistic, and he is very much centered on what is first best for his nation first. So that's the way to look at it. When Trump was on the roof, he called out to Peter, reporter. They all laughed, and Peter said hello back. It was a funny moment. Yeah, there's a lot of funny moments of Trump on that White House roof, and it's being made into a great meme. I think that's one of the greatest legacies of Donald J. Trump is the fact that he is the memes president. If you look at the White House account, they're posting memes, and they're modern communicators. They know how to communicate with the modern world, and they know how to do memes. And Trump is great, great for all of that. Guys, thanks for joining for today's stream. Like I said, when I'm in Melbourne, I'm going to try to do 7 o'clock streams on Mondays and Tuesdays where work permits. Otherwise, I'll probably start at 9. I just go live. Again, very casual show. I just chat about news. I talk to you guys. I read your comments, and we get through some of these things today. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your comments today. Thank you for the super chats. I will be live again tomorrow with Avi Yemeni, I believe, on the Opposition podcast. So that's happening tomorrow at 7 p.m. If you've missed the debate from yesterday, this whole show started with me talking about the debate from yesterday, where I was apparently the world's worst moderator. If you want to watch the world's worst moderating, you can go back to the Opposition podcast episode from yesterday, where Avi Yemeni debates John Ruddick, and watch that to your heart's content. But for now, guys, I'm going to sign off. See you guys next time, which is tomorrow night. I'll see you tomorrow night. See you guys. Good night.